And so, as if this isn't complicated enough, as if we don't have enough going on that involves the president and, in particular, DOJ and William Barr, the New York Times has just broken a story that we have gotten confirmed. Carol Lee has gotten confirmed. I'm just going to read it to you, and then, Tom, I'll come to you and get your thoughts on this. Bill Barr has assigned an outside prosecutor to scrutinize the criminal case against President Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, according to people familiar with the matter. The review is highly unusual and could trigger more accusations of political interference by top Justice Department officials into the work of career prosecutors. Tom?
Chris, I think in knowing Carol's excellent work on this, I think that it's a story that is confusing to me why they are taking a look at this. Michael Flynn has not been sentenced. There may be particular concerns with respect to Michael Flynn's representation. I think his current counsel has raised some interesting questions about his past counsel. But there's been a number of theories that have been floated about Michael Flynn's, what he was aware of, what he was told, what his attorneys were told with respect to the interview that happened with him and two FBI agents, one being Peter Strzok, excuse me, and the interview where he lied. And remember, he pleaded guilty to lying, and he said that he did it, and he said he had no reservations about that guilty plea. So it's very unusual in a case where there is a guilty plea and it involves the direct behavior of the person that's charged. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly is being reviewed here, particularly because the government asserts that any sort of notes, and apparently there were notes that were placed in the 302 and notes by the agents that were involved in this that said that they thought that in fact Michael Flynn did display candor in his interview with him. They did not initially state that he was lying. All that information, according to federal prosecutors, was turned over to Flynn's defense team. So it wasn't as if he was unaware of this prior to entering his guilty plea. His attorneys have raised all sorts of allegations of prosecutorial misconduct, allegations of the government strongly, or at least the prosecutors involved in this case strongly deny. It's just odd to me where you have a guilty plea, you have a sentencing coming up, that now they're taking a second look at this in frankly, a very cut and dry example. What did he say on a phone call? Then what did he tell the FBI that he said? So I really don't understand this at its high level, but I need to understand a little bit more about what's going on before even offering a more detailed thought.
Well, we appreciate your background on this story and your expertise on it. Thank you so much.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.